26th global celebration of World Press Freedom Day, which this year takes place in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. Jointly organised by UNESCO, the government of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and the African Union Commission. It will focus on the role of the media in elections and democracy in times of disinformation. For the first time since 2004, Ethiopia has no journalists behind bars. Media outlets have been reopened and websites have been unblocked. It really does seem like the dawn of a new era for Ethiopia, and therefore only fitting that World Press Freedom Day is held here this year.
Over the past 1 year only, various reform efforts have been undertaken in expanding freedoms, particularly in relation to ensuring the right to freedom of expression. I would like to start by thanking UNESCO and the prestigious jury of eminent personalities of UNESCO Peace Prize for having chosen our Prime Minister, His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, as this year's laureate in recognition of his efforts for peace, and in particular, peace in our region.
2018 was the most dangerous year on record to be a journalist, according to Reporters Without Borders. A total of 80 were murdered, 348 were imprisoned, and a further 60 were taken hostage. A minute of silence was held at the opening ceremony to remember those who have fallen. Politicians, activists, students, lawyers and NGOs who participated in the Congress came to celebrate this unprecedented age of press freedom in Ethiopia's history.
I've been arrested 5 times under the Sedition Act in my country for my cartoon, and the government banned more than 10 of my books, cartoon books, and I've been charged with 9 sedition charges in my country, which the punishment could be up to 20 years in jail. And I also was under travel ban for several years, and the printers been raided because they print my books, and my book are not allowed to be published or to be sold in any bookstores in Malaysia.
Let me ask you a question, sir.
Yeah.
When your books have been banned and you have been harassed so many times, you've been arrested multiple times, why do you continue?
The important thing is to understand that talent is not a gift. Talent is a responsibility. This is fight through cartoon. The documentation of what happened to me so many times, and the important thing here is the philosophy of cartooning. I have many philosophy like, why pinch when you can punch?
Wei Lone and Chao So-u are 2 Reuters journalists who have been jailed in Myanmar since December 2017 and sentenced to 7 years on fabricated charges. They have been awarded the Pulitzer Prize for their reporting on the Rohingya massacre and the UNESCO Guillermo Cano World Press Freedom Prize. Wei Lone's brother Thure accepted the award on their behalf.
But what we are waiting for is what the family members waiting for is that there will be government pardon, government New Year's amnesty, something like they are releasing prisoner. Yeah. We're just waiting for the hoping they will be released in the amnesty.
Wei Lone and Chao So-u were eventually freed on Tuesday, the 7th of May, after more than 500 days in prison. It's a wonderful outcome, and it comes just days after World Press Freedom Day. The power of people is incredible. World Press Freedom Day 2018 focused on the role of the press during elections, the harassment of female journalists, artistic freedom, the phenomenon of fake news, democracy and obstacles reporters face as they are silenced.
From my own personal experience, I would say that a woman often has to work twice as hard as a man, because one, it's just as you see, you know, biologically women are a bit disadvantaged in terms of when you are being assigned, or when editors in newsrooms are looking at story allocation, they would want to first of all look at the safety of a journalist and the defense mechanism that they would put when they go out on the front line. So you'll find that in most occasions they would prefer to give the assignments to the male counterparts instead of the females.
We represent journalist unions in pretty much every African country. Over 150,000 African journalists come together to try to improve their working environment, whether that's their wages, whether it's access to information, whether it's the laws that govern regulation and so on. So it's a very important thing for journalists to do, but obviously in some countries there's been enormous pressure on journalists not to have their own union, not to have a collective voice, and for many years Ethiopia was one of those countries, but as we've all recognised during World Press Freedom Day, enormous steps have been made here in terms of media freedom, and the clamour from Ethiopian journalists is now we want a union too.
UNESCO commissioned a handbook, Journalism, Fake News and Disinformation, and I co-edited that handbook, and it's designed to really equip news organisations and individual journalists, student journalists and journalism educators to enable better and more robust reporting of the disinformation crisis, but also to give them the skills that are necessary in a digital environment to assess and verify social media content, visual images and video content, for example.
With all the dire statistics in the worst attack on journalists in a generation, emerges this light of hope, with Ethiopia right in the centre of it all. In 2018, it was ranked 150 out of 180 countries in the World Press Freedom Index. This year, it improved 40 rank points. Since Prime Minister Dr Abiy Ahmed has taken office, Ethiopians have been living in exceptional times.
Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia to deliver his special address.
Only a year ago, Ethiopia was labeled as Africa's foremost tier of journalists in one of the most repressive environments in the world for functioning of independent media. As you are well aware, the Committee for the Protection of Journalists recently reported that for the first time in over 12 years, there are no journalists in prison in Ethiopia.
Next year, Ethiopia will have to face a further challenge: elections. UK Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt announced that his government will donate £15.5 million to support the new government and pledge to train 60 African journalists at leading British media outlets.
When I was in university, I used to contribute on local magazines, but unfortunately almost all of them were shut down by the government, and some of the journalists were imprisoned and others were exiled. And as a young journalist, I'm going to network and also get information about disinformation. After a year, there is Ethiopian election in 2020. So if I am able to get more information, if I am able to empower myself, I think it will help me to dig reliable information and to report to my people.
As a blogger who has been into prison many times previously, this celebration of the World Press Freedom Day in Ethiopia means a lot to me because in the first place it is a kind of recognition for the government for the steps it took forward, but it's not the end. So I think it encourages the government when they go the right direction. There are still legal constraints which needed to be revised. In fact, there is a council of advisory groups already established, and there are working groups that are working on a number of media laws that have been affecting the media space.
So the fact that this event takes place here, I hope is also a sign of encouragement for this evolution, which we see as very positive, and that will help us structure this evolution within the regulation, within the legal system also of the country.
For the first time since 2004, Ethiopia has no journalists behind bars. It really is positive progress and gives a message loud and clear to other African nations and to the world that change is possible through reform. 2018 was the most dangerous year on record to be a journalist. RSF, IOHR, NGOs and journalists around the world call on the UN to put in place a special envoy for the safety of journalists before it's too late.